Live.
Okay.
Huh? We're starting. I mean, what number are we on? 198?
This is 198, I believe.
Okay.
So,
David, you survived another week in the madhouse that is, well, I guess the whole planet, but it's America in particular. How'd you do it?
Well, it was wonderful because I was blissfully unaware of my own demise. Much like most of us, seeing as like, what did it turn out that we had sorry, we getting technical difficulties over there. But
yeah, a couple.
So I didn't know we had Russian subs off the coast over here. I didn't know that supporting Ukraine would have such dire consequences, except for all the fucking times that Biden said that it would if we started using armaments. Other than that, the guy without a brain knew that firing American weapons in Russia might lead to an uptick in hostility, and that other people might not just lie over or roll over and take it so much. What do you think about that, Dane? Seeing as we're the only state that stands to get nuclear.
Did you see the meme that was like Florida residents, you are strongly encouraged not to shoot at the submarine? I love that they feel like they need to tell us that because, they probably need to tell us that.
They have to. Like, I don't know if you know what Florida's like.
Yeah, so I'm happy to say our fellow Florida man did not start World War III. I don't know what the Russian intelligence was thinking, if they were thinking that of all states to post up off of on the eastern seaboard, Florida would probably be the last one I would pick. But who knows? Maybe they were trying to poke the bear. They said we're going for the most American state of all 50.
Well, I heard Texas is like starting to think about seceding again. It's like, it's that time of year again. It's already time for Texas to secede. We've got submarines off the coast over here. And, at least Washington, D.C. and all the people that support Ukraine won't be affected at all by this. It just kind of makes me wonder. Go ahead.
Do you think if the nuclear, and I understand it may not have had nukes, it was nuclear powered, but do you think if the nuclear sub decided to start shooting at Florida, you think we could get some of those Ukraine funds to help out here in Florida, or does that not happen?
But I can guarantee you that a lot of people are super stoked about it being nuclear powered, so it's at least green. It's not adding to any of the CO2 emissions. So at least if we're going to burn in a fiery death ball, we don't have a little more omission. So that death ball or that scorched earth isn't then covered up by the water eventually with all of our corpses on it.
Yeah, good guy Putin, always and forever thinking of Greenpeace first. So, well, with that being said, should we get into talking about what we're talking about?
I guess we should talk about what we're talking about this 198 episode of Weapons of Meme Destruction. Apparently, Epstein didn't kill himself segment this week is Redfield does decide to question the science. I remember when it wasn't so cool to question the science, the entity of science.
Yeah, or Mr. Science or Science God, or I forget, what are we calling him these days? Other than fugitive justice.
That's retired and all that good stuff. Well, yeah. We'll save that for after. And then, of course, we come back to the old meme destruction, which is trust the experts. And we have meme stock aplenty in this segment. So with all that being said, Dane, are you ready to jump in?
Let's jump in. Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 198, which can be found at WMDpodcast.com/198. You can get the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction, and you can get the video right here on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and X. Although, you get the live recording now, you can get the after recording later on those platforms. So, David, this week, the elites are sometimes getting confronted with the truth, even though they never admit it. And, even though we're not talking about this week, I'm sure people were aware of it. So Biden was over at the G7 summit, and they had a scene where a skydiver came in, and all of the world leaders, right, Trudeau and Macron and those guys are standing around watching this guy, and Biden is just wandering off over. And then the New York Post runs an article that says, they had to move over to make it look like Biden wasn't wandering off, which is exactly what happened. And then we have just the brainlets running cover for Biden the whole time, saying no, this is misinformation. And that who are you going to believe, your eyeballs or these fucking morons? But, that's the world we live in. And that, although not what we're talking about this week, it dovetails nicely with, not holding the quote unquote powerful accountable.
But isn't that the same thing as wasn't it during the same week that he was at one of those receptions where people were all clapping and listening to music and they're all grooving and singing along, and he's just sitting there going, not moving, not doing anything, just staring into the oblivion, which is his brain. I don't know. I mean, it hasn't been a good week for old Joseph, let's just say.
Does he have any anymore when you get to his stage? Are there good weeks anymore?
I don't know. I think it's just, maybe. In his own little world, I'd like to think that he's having a hell of a time, just having a good old time. If you don't have any responsibility or any accountability for anything that you do, which, again, he's never really had during his entire career, but now I feel like he's just kind of savoring it. Yeah, I can poop my pants on live television. You're not going to do anything. Everyone's going to cover it up for me. It must be nice.
Yeah.
It must be nice to know that you've got the backing of everybody, no matter what you do. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah, if only.
Kind of like somebody else I know that a couple of years ago had carte blanche to just tell the American people what they can and can't do, no matter what happened.
Right. Yeah. Which I'm pulling up here right now. I had my thing on the wrong tabs. I got my merds all wixed up, but okay. I'm bringing it up now because I apparently have to do it from a different space. So, yes, David, somebody who was not responsible, but yet, although, several years on, we're still trying to hold him responsible, and we just, gosh darn it, we just can't seem to do it. But I think it was either last week or the week before, Fauci was in front of Congress again, where he lied to them, a couple years ago about whether or not he funded gain of function, et cetera, et cetera. And he's testifying again, which when you look at it, when you look at the hearing, it really seems to be they are well aware that all of the house of cards has come down. And so now they're just trying to figure out who gets a slap on the wrist hard enough to placate the masses so that we don't get too upset about a virus that killed, I think, 20 million people globally? And then God knows what the long-term health consequences are going to be of the vaccine they push and all this kind of stuff. Understandably, that would make quite a few people pretty upset. And so the power structure is scrambling. Who can we throw out as the sacrificial lamb? And that's what this hearing just smacks of to me. It's all right, Fauci, you step down, so you're not technically in government anymore, but just go in front of Congress and let the hostile, Republican representatives ask you questions and, maybe get some egg on your face or whatever, but nothing's really going to happen to you. We're not actually going to prosecute you for mass murder or treason or any of the other things that you were actually involved in. Just go out there, take your lashes for the rest of us, and then, we can sweep this whole thing under the rug. Well, Fauci has some things to say in that hearing, which what you see here on the screen is Chris Cuomo on his personal channel on X, kind of like Tucker, right? He interviews people. He's got his own show. And he's interviewing this gentleman here is Dr. Robert Redfield. He was the former director of the CDC. He was actually the director at the beginning of COVID. before I think it was Rochelle Walensky took over for him. And Redfield is going to drop some bombshells about what Fauci had to say. Some of them, if you were listening to tomorrow's news today on WMD podcast way back in 2021 and 2022, some of these things you've already heard. But again, don't take it from your humble co-host here, folks. Take it from the former director of the CDC, because if anybody has a motivation to lie, it's him. But let's see what he has to say about a couple of the points that that Fauci said during his recent hearing.
Outlawed gain of function. Is it true that Obama outlawed gain of function and that then people in government agencies found a sneaky way to get it done around the restriction in another country?
There's a couple things. Obama administration clearly did make it so that we could not do gain of function research in the United States. Tony knows more of this even than I, because he was, and people don't know this, but in 2002, 2003, the mission of biodefense that we had in our nation, which was in the U.S. Army in a Fort Detrick, was transferred to NIH under the direction of Tony Fauci. So he got somewhere like $40 billion to basically manage our biodefense program. I always argued that NIH had a different mission. I didn't see their mission was biodefense. I saw their mission was science to help improve the human condition, and I thought the Defense Department should stay in charge of the biodefense, but that all changed in 2002. I think most people don't know it, and I think it was a big mistake. But I think, I think that I'm trying to remember exactly your question now.
So if that was all that was said in this, almost 4-minute clip, that would be bad enough, right? Because again, Redfield didn't explicitly state it, but what NIH's function was and still does, up to today, which has its own Pandora's box of problems, is it is supposed to be engaged in the purely academic side of science. The purpose of NIH is what all people who, worship the state will tell you. You can't take funding away from government, because who would engage in scientific research if you didn't have money sitting in a pool with the government that gets doled out to researchers, because much of this research is going to come to naught. That's just the nature of science. There's no practical application that you can create a product and generate money off of. So, the profit motive being what it is, private companies generally are not going to expend large sums of money on research, the base level. I'm not talking about R&D, but like the base level scientific research, because there's no way to guarantee that they're going to make money of it. Well, setting aside that that's not true, even if we accept it on its own terms, that's what NIH is supposed to do. It is supposed to get this giant pool of appropriated funds every year from Congress, from your tax dollars, and it is supposed to be the arbiter of those funds. It is supposed to decide, it is supposed to take applications from researchers at Stanford and Harvard and UNC and blah, 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 and a researcher, a scientist says, NIH, I want to do X study. Here's what I think, here's what my thesis is, here's what I think my conclusion is going to be, et cetera, et cetera. And NIH picks and chooses where that money goes. That's a problem in and of itself, right? This sort of incestuous relationship between academia and government, right? We talk about incentives all the time. But if NIH stopped right there, as bad as that is, it would stop right there. On top of that, in the early 2000s, they took over biodefense. Not going to have a good time.
So the health organization known as the National Institute of Health is a part of the bioweapons program?
It runs it. It now, instead of just controlling the flow of funds to academia, it now also controls the funds to biodefense projects. It is the kingmaker, so to speak.
I don't see how anything bad could ever come from that.
Right.
I mean, in all honesty, I think only good things could ever possibly come from that, to be honest. And as we all know, the science, as we'll get into, seeing as we are talking about Fauci, scientific research paid for by lots of people. I don't know, Frito-Lay, Coca-Cola. It always seems like when these companies pay for certain studies, the studies always somehow come out to make the company that paid for it look good.
And
Somehow.
make a lot of money. And
Somehow,
they make money.
some way. And then they make money. And then maybe along the way, they cause diabetes or they kill people. Oh, I don't know. It just bad outcomes, just like that. I don't know. And then, by the way, who tells the government how much money they should give these places? Or do they just decide it themselves?
Wait, who tells the government how much? Oh, yeah, they decide. Fauci decides, essentially. I mean, obviously he has a team that reviews applications and stuff like that, but the buck stops with the head of the NIH.
And
so, yeah.
And I can't imagine. I mean, he handled his power. He definitely didn't overstep any boundaries or anything when he had absolute control over a country. He definitely wielded it with a lot of responsibility and care. And then he also takes accountability for all the things that he got wrong during said time, too.
Yeah. And, don't be misled. I know the people that predominate in the sane space are not misled by this, but your normie friends and family probably are. Don't be misled by this term biodefense. It's the same thing as saying national defense. There is no such thing as defense when you have no legitimate threat. The reason why the military-industrial complex is so outward-looking, right? Where else can I stir up shit in the world? Is because that's how they make money. You need wars if you are a manufacturer of war materials, whether it be arms or armor or anything that goes into the logistics, all of that stuff. You need war to make money. And again, going back to incentives mattering, if that is the way you make money, and then you are also have your hand in the pot of policymakers that decide when to go to war, how long to prolong the war, whether or not they want to forestall or completely ignore the lost art of diplomacy so war doesn't start in the first place entirely. All of those things, all of those incentives lead back to the direction of more war. And this is no different with the NIH and biodefense. It's not about defense. If you ask the NIH, if you ask Fauci, what he'll say about it is, well, we need to do studies to make sure, because we can't guarantee that the other countries around the world are going to, not violate the Geneva Convention and engage in what was colloquially called in the past germ warfare, right? Nobody is supposed to do that. It is a violation of international law for any country, whether the United States or whether you're Suriname. You can't do that. And so NIH will say, yeah, but we can't trust the Chinese or the Russians not to do it. So we need to do research to make sure that our, soldiers are defended so that, we can just inject them with a vaccine when they try to, infect us with some germs and, disable our fighting force. Again, that's what they tell you in public. That's what they say out in the open is their purpose. But it's very clear on the other side of COVID that that's not at all what they do ever. It's about making money.
It's almost like if you, let's just say, just a topic off of my head, if you make a ministry to defend against homelessness and it's supposed to rid itself or help get rid of the homeless, or not get rid of, but it solved the homeless crisis. I guess, what's his name? Newsom did get rid of the homeless for 2 weeks in San Francisco when she arrived, but it was supposed to get the homeless off the streets and help them, better their lives. But in doing so, wouldn't you get rid of the whole reason that you exist, and wouldn't you work yourself out of a job? So I would argue that the incentive of the organization that was created to get rid of the homeless is to make sure that the homeless keep being homeless so that they keep having a job so they don't in turn end up homeless. You see how that works? So it's that old adage that we always say. It's like whatever they say it's going to do, just go ahead and assume that it's the opposite of what they say it's going to do. And then usually you'll come up with some pretty astute observations.
You'll definitely come to a closer approximation of the truth than you will from anything they say or taking what they say at face value. That is for certain. So again, if we stop the video right there, it would be bad enough. But Redfield forgets what the question was. Cuomo fills him back in, and then he has a more specific, pointed answer to Cuomo's question, which is even going to make this first part that we talked about seem rather pedestrian compared to what Redfield is about to cop to now.
was made illegal and that Tony or somebody said, let's go do it in other countries and nobody will know.
So what they did was they set up a series of committees that were allowed to grant waivers and approve it. And this is some of the controversy around the Wuhan lab research, because it apparently never went through that committee.
Again, that's even worse, but it still gets worse.
And people argue a lot of it was semantics. I do disagree with Tony pretty aggressively in his testimony with Rand Paul, when he says that he's never done gain-of-function research, NIH has never done gain-of-function research. Well, what they did was, again, I think a stain on them because of the lack of transparency. Tony, different groups, and he has a lot of influence on the groups, decided they had commissions to define gain-of-function research since Obama had outlawed it, right? And so the groups that came together to define it came up with a definition, which I don't personally agree with. But, by the letter of the law, Tony can say that the Wuhan lab, even if it was research that was done, it didn't meet the letter of the law of gain of function. What Tony did was the groups changed, and Tony didn't do this, but as the groups that he influenced did it, they changed the definition of gain of function research. So if you and I take a pathogen like COVID-19, which is not pathogenic for humans, and we teach it to be pathogenic for humans, that's not gain of function research. Because in order to be gain of function research by their definition, National Academy and others, you have to start with a pathogen that's already pathogenic for humans and make it more pathogenic for humans. Well, I think that's...
I get it.
It's ludicrous.
I get it.
But in the letter of the law, when Tony tells Rand Paul he didn't do gain of function research by the definition that is accepted in science, he's telling the truth. Because the definition that science said, if the pathogen wasn't a human pathogen, no matter how pathogenic you made it for man, it doesn't meet their definition. I think it's artificial, it's misleading. And so for me, if you take a pathogen that's non-pathogenic for humans and make it pathogenic for humans, that's gain of function.
It didn't have that function before, and now it has it. No fucking shit.
Would you say that it gained a function?
That's what I just said. That's literally what I just said. He didn't have the function, and now it has it, so it's gained something. Therefore, it's gained a function. Jesus Christ.
Now, a couple things about that. First of all, if you, dear listener, viewer, consumer of WMD content, if you thought that all Fauci and his cohorts did, the people that he funded, was manufacture a virus, a highly contagious virus that, again, killed about 20 million people globally. If you thought that that's all they did, you'd be wrong. Because what Redfield just told you is they also, before they did that, to cover their own ass, because they knew it was gain of function was illegal, they also manufactured their own definition. They manufactured the definition of gain of function so that they could do what they already knew that they were going to do, or maybe at the time, depending on where you drop the pin in the timeline, they were already doing, to be able to say, no, I'm not doing gain of function because don't you see, I made up this definition that it only means an already human pathogenic thing that we make more pathogenic, not a only pathogenic to animals, and then we're going to alter it to make it pathogenic to humans. So all along the way, you have the hallmarks of premeditation, of deliberation, of intentionality. Again, even if we accept the premise that the virus accidentally escaped from the lab, every single step up to that point was intentional. And it's well documented that it was intentional. And now you don't have to take, the two Hanyaks at WMD podcast word for it. You have the former director of the CDC, the director at the beginning of COVID, saying that he, quote unquote, aggressively disagrees with Fauci when he says that he didn't do gain of function research. That it's absolutely gain of function whether you take something out of nature and alter it to make it pathogenic to humans, or you take something already pathogenic and make it worse. In either case, you're creating something more harmful to human health than existed before. And that should be your baseline definition.
Well, it's kind of that whole adage, like, Dana David, why do you care? Why do you, it doesn't matter. Like, we were just doing our best with what we had. Well, that's what we were saying back in 2021, 2022. Like, none of this is adding up. Like, how the hell, why was it racist again? If we knew all this, or at least Tony did, as they keep colloquially calling him, if Tony knew all that, then they weren't doing their best, because all of the mandates that they were putting out, they knew exactly how this virus transmitted or how it behaved, because they saw it in a lab before we did. So they must have known that at least masks weren't gonna work. They must have known that stay home, stay safe didn't work, and none of their edicts that they handed down. And then you add on top of the fact that the vaccine comes out, and then they start threatening to take away your rights and privileges, i.e. travel, free movement, and so on and so forth. So again, like, it's premeditated. They knew what it was. They said it was racist for you to say, hey, it came from a lab, when they knew goddamn good and well that it came from a lab, because he was paying for it to come from a lab. Like, when you start adding these things up, it was absolutely, it looks so bad now. And that's all we were saying is like, hey, maybe we don't have to buy this whole thing hook, line, and sinker. Maybe we should be allowed to express it. Nope, you have to listen to Fauci because he knows, he is the science. Well, okay, well, it's got us, we locked down the country, which has economically fucked us. A lot of people died because of him and this research. And a lot of people died because of the things that he said that we needed to do to protect ourselves from this. Not to mention, the countless lives that were lost from not being able to do the things.
Routine medical treatment, as hospitals were shut down, we talked about what you're seeing now. You're seeing the cancer rates just explode because, again, we're not even saying that the vaccine itself is causing, increases incidence of cancer or whatever. But you can go back, I forget which episode it is, you can look at it and you can look at the timestamp when we talked about it on that episode, when we were talking about the fact that, like, routine, mammograms, colonoscopies, very routine screenings that every doctor worth his salt will tell every person above, whatever age, 30, 40, 50, whenever men are supposed to get prostate exams and women are supposed to get mammograms and all that kind of stuff, is do this regularly, because you never know when you could have one of these, highly dangerous cancers. So we need to catch it early so we can, get on top of it. And all of those routine procedures across the country and across the world were just stopped, because Fauci and his cohorts had this singular focus in terms of public health. Last time I checked, public health was like a broad net that encompassed a whole lot of different things, including mental health and et cetera, et cetera. But they monomaniacally focused on one thing, a virus, to the detriment of all other aspects of public health. And people missed screenings, and by the time they found, the cancer that they would have caught early, people all over the place. This is why we also, talked about at the time, for the first time in the 20th century, the average mortality rate in the United States, a developed Western country with access to some of the best healthcare in the world, allegedly, went backwards by, I think, what was it, 2.5 years? You know how many young people need to unexpectedly die in a 300 million person population to make the average mortality rate go backwards? Again, in the United States, the richest country that's ever existed in the history of mankind. And it wasn't just the United States. It also went backwards in other Western European countries that have, allegedly, top tier medical systems. So again, all of these things, when you throw it into a pot and mix it together, calling it anything other than mass murder or you know, if you want to get into the whole selling out your country aspect, treason, as far as what Fauci and his comrades did, calling it anything other than that is just lying to yourself. It's being disingenuous. It's massaging words because we don't want to say the bad thing out loud. This is exactly what it is, because they knew it the whole time. There was intentionality and premeditation.
That says that silence is violence. From the side that says you can't misgender people. From the side that says all these things that we need to accept all these people. You couldn't say this thing came from a lab. And you couldn't say that Anthony Fauci had a hand in it unless you're a racist, and it killed millions of people. So again, it's hard to take them at face value for their moral plurality, as they claim to have the highest level of, that they have all the good for all the beings at mind at all the times, aside from making money with a certain procedure, because a certain thing that they definitely weren't supposed to be doing, they did anyway, and they made a lot of money off of a lot of people's deaths, and they aren't going to be held accountable for it. And like you said, if they are held accountable, it's a slap on the wrist to them. So again, and then another thing that wasn't mentioned I wanted to bring up is a lot of people didn't get to say goodbye to their loved ones that they lost because of Fauci. So again, even at the slightest modicum of like respect for another human's rights, he had zero of it. and now we're just supposed to sit here and go, well, he did the best he could with the knowledge that he had. Like, bullshit. He had the knowledge. He was the only one that had the knowledge, and he was just still handing this shit out anyway. So it's like, you didn't. And again, we say it all the time. They're at 35,000 feet, and we're not even ants. They don't even see us. That's why
we're under the ants.
we're microscopic. So
you know, the last thing I wanted to say before we move on is I'm glad you brought up rights, because I want to address as this final point this whole, you know, I'm going to call out David's boy Arnold just because his little quip on this really encapsulates this whole attitude that we heard all throughout the last 4 years. The screw your freedoms. Right? What was the narrative about that was, listen, you're running around and you're worried about First Amendment free speech and your ability to work and provide your family, and you're worried about all of these kind of things. And really, when you get down to it, we're talking about a virus that's the difference between life or death. So are your freedoms really that important that you can't give them up when we're talking about saving lives and all that kind of stuff? And the reason why the answer to that is yes, and why the dismissive tone and narrative around people complaining about canceling legitimate, highly credentialed people like, you know, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya at Stanford University, or Sunetra Gupta at Oxford University, Martin Koldorf at Harvard, you know, highly credentialed individuals who had just as valid, if not more of a valid opinion than Fauci. Yes.
Dr. Malone, Dr. McCullough. People that are seeing this shit. People that invented the fucking cure for it. Go ahead, Dane.
Is if the freedoms weren't screwed and people are allowed to have an open discourse, right, in the land of the free, the home of the brave, where you're supposed to have freedom of speech, if people were allowed to talk like adults about this stuff, we might have found out all of this stuff that we're finding out in 2024 back in 2021. And how many people then wouldn't have had to miss their cancer screening? How many people wouldn't have been coerced into an experimental gene therapy that's not a vaccine, but even though that's what they want to call it, how many people would that not have happened to? How many small businesses wouldn't have had to happen closed? How many, you know, old parents in old folks' home that, you know, had to die alone wondering why their family didn't come to visit anymore because they had dementia and didn't know, you know, why there were no visitors anymore? How many of those lives would have been different if, for the simple, fundamental Americana reason of free speech, would have been allowed to flourish throughout this time, and we were allowed to talk about these situations not 4 years post hoc? A lot. There's a reason why the Constitution doesn't say, here's your list of rights with an asterisk at the bottom that says, but in case of a scary virus thing, none of these apply. It doesn't say that. Those are your rights, and they're inviolable regardless of changing circumstances. And it's like that for a reason, because free speech would have gone a hell of a long way to stop a lot of this damage if it had been allowed to continue 3-4 years ago.
And didn't they say that it was to save lives that we needed to censor people on the internet that were giving away
Of
misinformation?
course. If it saves one life, yeah.
Weren't we talking about Canada passing that law about hate speech just last week? Weren't 3,000 people rounded up for hate speech in Great Britain last year alone? Like,
I wouldn't
again,
be surprised. I don't know the numbers, but yeah.
They always say it. They always say that it's for safety. But if it was, then we wouldn't be trying to censor everything nowadays. Now, would we? We wouldn't be enacting hate speech laws. So now it's not about your safety anymore. Just like it was never about your safety with Anthony Fauci. And it never will be. So again, this is the first time that you've ever heard of it on a lowly little, 121st ranked Australian political podcast. If this is where you're hearing it first, you just got taught a life lesson. Don't fall for their tricks again. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. So, David, from one unaccountable bastard to an entire smorgasbord, an entire crew of unaccountable bastards. And
are you talking about the apes? Are you talking about us?
We are the real dangers to society. Let me tell you.
I'm telling you, those guys fucking vote with their dollars.
Not this will be surprising to literally nobody on the political spectrum because no matter where you are, right, left, center, doesn't matter. The guys on Wall Street are pretty universally hated. Now, for a lot of good reasons, not universally good reasons. There are some. I'm not going to go into the camp of nothing they do provides a valuable function to the society. But what I will say is that the way that the game has been rigged to allow them to cheat and to allow what their otherwise valuable function would be, which let's just put that under the umbrella of price discovery. That's an actual important thing for a market to be able to do, is figure out what would be a fair market value price for a company that generates goods and services, et cetera, so that humanity collectively knows where we should invest, where we should dedicate our resource. Oh, this company is making this thing that's, making breakthroughs in cancer, or this company is, giving sight to people who can't see, or prosthetic limbs to people who, lost an arm or were born without one. We want, as a society, to collectively direct resources to those companies. And one way to do that, an efficient, functional way to do that, is through a stock market. Because once you have price discovery and you allow the market to see company X is producing this product, it seems to work, it seems to help people, it generates profits, let's put more money behind that. These are all valuable functions in society. But that's not what Wall Street does. And if you had any remaining illusions about that after the 2021 sort of, ape revolution on Walmart that really exposed a lot of, on Wall Street, exposed a lot of Wall Street's warts, the apes ain't done yet. They're actually making a comeback. And the response to what the apes are doing tells you everything that you need to know about these people.
First of all, Dane,
yes,
don't call it a comeback. We've been here for years, all right? Rocking our peers, putting
suckers in fear.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely putting the Wall Street boys in fear. Just listen to how they respond to it. So, brief recap. GameStop started this whole thing. And GameStop was actually started by an individual named Keith Gill. And his X handle, how he refers to himself online, his community, is Roaring Kitty. And his whole method of analyzing stocks is, clever, entertaining. It's funny. He uses memes to, kind of make the whole dull process of talking about stocks fun. But he's also very bright in terms of his analysis. And he pinpointed in late 2020, I think, maybe earlier, that GameStop was highly shorted, and shorted to such a degree that based on the number of outstanding shares, that if a few thousand people, whatever, just bought shares and simply held them. I like the stock, I'm buying the shares, and I'm holding them. That eventually, because it was so over leveraged with shorts, that the shorts would be squeezed. That they would all have to buy back and it would create a cascading event where they have to buy back at higher and higher prices, because again, the apes, the retail investors that spotted this in the numbers, decided they weren't going to sell. And so who do they have to buy from if the apes aren't going to sell? Well, you keep offering at a price higher and higher until you get the people that hold the shares to sell. So that's how the price runs up. So if all the short sellers are like, I need to buy my shares to close out my short position, I need 100 shares, and all the apes are like, we're not selling for 20 bucks. Okay, I'll offer 40. We're not selling. I'll offer 50. We're not selling. I'll offer 500. We're not selling. That's price discovery. And whether you like that strategy or you don't like that strategy, that's what a market is supposed to do. Short sellers serve a valuable function. They serve the function of when you have a legitimately shitty business, whether because of fraud or any number of other reasons, short sellers are the ones that tell the market, this is a bad company, don't invest in it, and then eventually that company goes out of business. But when they're able to do all kinds of funny business, like parking trades and dark pools, don't worry, we're going to talk about some of these technical terms here in a second. Parking trades and dark pools using payment for order flow, to have market makers encouraged to push trades in a certain direction versus another. All of these tactics really turn short sellers into predators, to where they're not just going after defunct bad companies, they're going after just struggling companies to try to drive them into the ground, because every dollar that they make off of a successful short sell, if a company goes bankrupt, they don't have to pay taxes on that. Again, talk to your representatives if you have a problem with that part of the tax code. But for the fundamental purpose, back to the apes, for Keith Gill saying, this is a buy, hold it, and it's going to squeeze, they accused him of being a market manipulator. They accused the apes of creating chaos on Wall Street. They accused average, everyday, individual retail investors with portfolios of a few $100 of completely upending their game that they've been running for so long. And we have a video, but before I play it, I'm going to let David chime in. But we have a video from SEC Chair Gary Gensler basically admitting on live television that they're cheating. And nobody says a thing.
Well,
instead, they blame it on us.
How long have they been saying the quiet part out loud? How long was that?
How long? Well, basically since this all happened.
Well, I'm not even just talking in this, for instance. It's like they can't even help themselves. They're like, basically, all the people you need to hate are all the people that are just trying to do the right thing while we're trying to manipulate the market for our own profit. So if you get in our way, you're an asshole. And if I get what I want, everything's working hunky-dory. And anecdotally, who was the guy? God damn it. It was on MSNBC or Fox Business or... No, it was on MSNBC Business, whatever the fuck that is. Anyway, I remember right at the very beginning of COVID, he was on their little business chat, and he said, anyone holding hotel stocks need to ditch it right now. And... because this whole country's getting shut down. People aren't going to travel. People aren't going to do it. And guess what position he had on multiple different hotels? He had the short position on multiple different hotels. So these, just to give a little caveat into what you were saying, these guys go on these shows and they don't have to disclose what their holdings are, but they can talk to an entire nation and they can manipulate the market in and of themselves and push them in the direction that they need to make their money. I think that guy made millions of dollars just about one little appearance alone with his position. So again, it's like it speaks to like how rigged that system is. And finally, like I believe I was more of a protest vote buying into the AMC than anything at the time, and it was for that exact reason. It's like, no, you know what? I'm just a dumb little guy with some money in my pocket, but I know that if I put money into this spot, it's going to fuck you over, kind of like you've been fucking us over for years. So there you go. Take it. Yeah. I'll hold it forever.
Get your comeuppance. So, all right. So this is only about a minute and a half video, so we're just going to let the whole thing play through, and then we'll highlight for you the points in case you don't catch them yourself about what it is that Gary Gensler admitted to that really just gives away the whole game. So again, keep in mind, for those of you that don't know, Gary Gensler is the chair of the SEC, which is end all be all regulatory body for Wall Street. If there's Wall Street malfeasance going on, it is the SEC's job to get to the bottom of it, punish it, and make sure it doesn't happen. Let's see what the chair has to say.
Issue that came to the forefront during the meme stock craze a year ago, January. The question became, is it a conflict of interest? On the one hand, I do get that there are people who look at this situation and say, well, wait a minute, brokers are getting, are getting paid by market makers just so that individual investors can have free commission trades. On the one hand, it is helpful to the market, but it's an answer to ban payment for order flow, Gary, or simply solidify disclosures so that investors can make their own decision about whether they want to pay a commission and not deal with a market maker.
So we're looking at the SEC as to how to facilitate and drive greater efficiency in this market so investors get a better deal. Payment for order flow, as you mentioned, is a payment between a broker that a broker receives for your order flow, and there are inherent conflicts of interest there. We're looking at how we can ensure greater competition. When you place a market order in the U.S., a market order at a retail platform, well over 90% of those trades go straight to the dark market, to a wholesaler that bought that order flow rather than competing trade by trade. And that's what we're trying to think through under the authorities we have.
I want you to look at her face when he's saying that. She's like, is he really saying this on live television? Now, your ears might have perked up when you heard, conflict of interest, and there's a lot of problems with payment for order flow when you're encouraging market makers to direct trades in order to make money. That's a problem. Okay, no debate there. The trade-off there is you get free trades, right? When you see Robinhood, they say unlimited free trades or whatever. That goes back to the old adage: if the product is free, then you're the product. So tread lightly there. But the most damaging thing about this is what he says there at the end. 90 to 95% of retail order flow is being sent to dark pools. Now, here's what that means. What do we say at the top of this segment? That price discovery is the most vital function of any stock market, and it is vital to free enterprise and capitalism. You need to be able to know what the market values a certain business or a certain product or service in order to be able to direct resources, allocate them efficiently. It's not just for you as the investor, you want to invest your money. Of course you want to return. Of course you want to make money. But it's also a price signal to the rest of the market, to the producer side of the market, to the other companies to say, okay, I'm going to use this company, or I'm going to invest in this company, or I'm going to invest in this R&D, this product, this whatever. The price matters. When you're sending 90 to 95% of all retail trades to the dark pool, what you're doing is you are parking the demand side of the supply and demand. You're parking it over here, and it is not giving an accurate representation of what the price signal for that particular stock is. If 90% of people are saying buy on pick your stock of choice, then that should be telling you there's a lot of demand here. And what do we have in an instance of high demand when you don't have a corresponding rise in supply? Right? Because they can't just issue new shares overnight unless they have some in their hand, is the price goes up. That is price discovery. Tons of demand until you find an equilibrium between buyers and sellers, and then the price either stabilizes, falls if you have more sellers, et cetera, et cetera. When you're parking 90 to 95% of all trades in the dark pool, you don't have an accurate representation of what the true value based on the demand in the market is for that stock. That is by definition cheating. That is highly, highly illegal, fraudulent, and every single person engaged in that should be locked in a cage forever. And yet you have the chair of the SEC saying, yeah, this happens. We know it. We're looking the other way. We don't care. Nobody going off in handcuffs. That's a major problem. Major problem, David.
But he's super smart, Dane. He's an expert.
Look at his smiling face.
I mean, but
I know.
I'm more concerned about her face. She's like, "What the fuck did you just say?" Like, And again, it'd be, it just gets more and more depressing the more and more we do this goddamn show, because it's like they've literally come out and they've said it in front of everybody that what they're doing, they shouldn't be doing. If you just listened to his words and you had an ounce of knowledge like you do about the goddamn stock market, you would know that what he just said was like, oh, so you should be in jail. Like, and then like, it should have just looked like the FBI open up, and like his door opens up and he gets pulled out right then and there. But that's not what happens. That's not what happens at all. But his organization, the SEC, they don't care. I'm sure they're getting paid just the same as, you know, every other government organization that's supposed to oversee things, that they just let shit slide, and they'll hold the individuals accountable, but never the people that have a lot of skin in the game, because those are the real individuals, don't you know? Because as we all know, corporations are people, and then they make money.
Yeah, and you know, the other part about this, and Fox Business isn't actually even one of the worst, and neither is Liz Clayman. You know, she's actually brought people on that have actually said some important things. Not that she intentionally did that with Gensler. He just kind of blurted it out himself. But the kind of fourth branch of government, right, the media, which is supposed to be its function in the classical way we think of checks and balances, is supposed to hold power accountable, speak truth to power. When they're either not doing their job, in Gensler's case, or when they're super powerful people on Wall Street making a bunch of money cheating, it's the media's job to get to the end of it. But yet, what do? They run with these terms like meme stock, which is just sort of a red herring to get you to ignore why these massive price fluctuations are happening in stocks like GME, GameStop, or AMC. When what the real reason of why those fluctuations are happening is because the apes, Keith Gill's thesis was correct, trapped shorts. And when they have to buy back in large numbers, that's why you see the explosion in price. But you don't see it, and they're able to suppress it for so long because they also use other clever financial tools like derivatives and swaps to be able to hide their shorts. So if you had an open, transparent view of, okay, what is the real short interest on this company, which is what Roaring Kitty, Keith Gill, was looking at pre the whole, meme stock craziness, is he was pointing out there's a shit ton of short interest here. That's how I know this trade is going to work. But now that, and again, in recent weeks, GME has kind of had a bit of a comeback and it's exploded again. And Keith Gill came back after like 2 years of being silent on X. And these bastards are running articles saying he's manipulating the market. And E-Trade, his brokerage account, has even threatened to ban him from using their trading account, as if it's illegal to tell people, I like this stock and here's the reasons why. That's what Jim fucking Cramer does on CNBC every day. And he's always wrong. If you listen to Jim Cramer, you're going to lose money 90 to 95% of the time. But Keith Gill says, I like GameStop, and here's my thesis why, which is what the entire financial media is predicated on. It's on experts coming in and saying, this stock's valuable, this stock's junk, here's my thesis why. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. That's not market manipulation. Even though Jim Cramer is, going to make you lose all your money, if it's not manipulation for them, it ain't for Keith Gill. But yet, once something doesn't go their way, it's lock him up. Don't let him trade anymore. That kind of bullshit. And so, again, it just goes back to no accountability for anybody except for us that expose the system.
It's almost like when they called Joe Rogan a quack for taking horse dewormer. It's almost like that. It's almost like they knew what they were doing, and they had an end goal that they wanted to get to, and they were going to let little old you get in the way with your ideas and your freedom. No. We're going to make sure that we get our money, and that we're going to smear anybody that gets in our way, which, I mean, hey, it's been working so far. Why would they stop now? I mean, it's just a little GameStop. It's just a little meme segment, All we got to do is besmirch them and tell them that they're idiots, and they'll go away, just like everybody else has. So that's all I have to say. It's just disgraceful. It's like it's every level where you're supposed to be doing the right thing to protect individuals, which will actually make the market stronger if every individual had stake in the market, that would create, you know, a potential wealth for all. But no, they just want the wealth for them. And then you can keep trading your little you keep buying your GameStop, and you can buy on Robinhood, and look at you, you're a little investor. Look at you, you got a corner office. That's the Robinhood thing nowadays. That's their commercial. Like, look at you, CEO, making money and making big trade. Look at you. It's like so condescending. Like,
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to do, but it's fucking condescending, so knock it off. But
Yeah.
that's all I gotta say is fuck Robinhood too, by the way. Didn't they do something with crypto or something like that? Where they were turning people over?
So they were public enemy number one during this whole run-up, because basically what they did is they took away the buy button. When GameStop and AMC were doing their run back in 2001 or 2021, if you had an account on Robinhood and you were seeing this price go up and you're like, hey, I want to get in on this, you couldn't even go buy those stocks. So you want to talk about market manipulation. If you are literally taking away one half of the supply and demand framework for how you arrive at a true, efficient, fair price discovery, you're manipulating the market. That is by definition manipulation. If you can just carte blanche take away one half of the supply and demand curve. But the most insidious thing about this all is because sometimes I've heard people say, okay, guys, they cheat. Why do you do it? Why do you invest in the market and all of that kind of stuff? And the reason why that's so insidious is you have to take into account the entire history of how we got here. Like, why do 401ks and Roth IRAs exist? And the reason they exist is because all along the way, the government has incrementally stolen from you, the average citizen, who doesn't have time to read through prospectus reports and get into the weeds of the accounting of a particular company to see if it's going to be a good investment or not. You don't have time for that. You got to work and take care of your family and do all this kind of stuff. But the government all along the way stole from you your ability to be fiscally responsible and financially conservative. If you go all the way back to the turn of the 20th century, if you had 10 gold bars, you could buy an entire house. And if you have 10 gold bars today, you can buy an entire house. Good luck trying to do that with the same amount of dollars today as you had back in 1913. It ain't going to happen. And what did FDR do? He set it all in motion with the confiscation of gold. And that encouraged, and then the expansion of the welfare state, which encouraged people to get on government programs and assistance. And then LBJ rolled along with his Great Society and turned that up to 11. But we still had during the LBJ, even though there was this push to get people to enroll in government, government's social welfare and things like that, at least our dollar was still backed by gold. And then 1972 rolls around and Nixon depegs the dollar from the gold. He closes the gold window, ends the gold standard. So now your dollars are no longer redeemable in gold. Now your dollars are no longer backed by anything of real, tangible, real world value. That turns the printing press loose. Then you roll into the 80s and the creation of 401ks and Roth IRAs. All along the way, what they have told you is give more of your resources, more of your hard-earned dollars to the experts to manage for you. You're too stupid to keep a gold bar locked away for retirement. You're too stupid to, have your money be worth as much in the future as it is today. You can't just save. You need to get into the speculative stock investment, market that you don't understand, because you can turn it over to the experts to run it for you. And now when they've stolen from you every single simple way to simply just say, listen, if I make $1, I'm going to put away 20 cents because eventually I want to retire, and that 20 cents is going to help me make it to my grave, hopefully. You can't do that anymore. Now you have to get into this casino that they created with these rules that they're constantly changing to help themselves. And then even if you do that, even if you play their game as they forced you to do, because they took away every other way for you to invest for your future, they cheat and steal and rob from you even at the very end. You literally cannot win with these people. They will cheat every single step of the way. and forcing you into risky financial investments, forcing you into, right, the smart thing to do is put money into your 401k. You know what that does? That just turns your money over to other people that you don't know and you'll never meet in your entire life to make financial decisions for you. And then when 2008 happens and it collapses and your net worth is halved overnight, good luck retiring on the time schedule that you had planned.
By the way, was their net worth halved, or were they protected?
I'm sure some of them were, but they were able to, maneuver their way out of it after the TARP bailout.
With the money that we didn't have?
Yeah, a bailout, golden
Out,
parachutes,
right?
yeah.
And their argument was, and you'll love this, Dane, we are the only ones that can fix it because we're the ones that fucked it up in the first place. Holy shit. Like, holy shit, that's your... Fuck, I wish I could do that. I wish I could screw up everything so amazingly and they get paid for it in the end, because my argument is like, I am the one that tied the knot and I'm the only one that can untie it. Trust me. Like,
yeah.
Isn't that what we just did? And we just hit fucking rock bottom, but and then and again, just to make sure that we drive this fucking point home, whose money bailed them out again?
Yeah,
Our
of
money,
course. Right. Well, not even our money. Yeah, our great grandchildren's money, because their futures were mortgaged in order to be able to pay them their bailouts in the here and now. Yeah.
But the problem is our generation just doesn't want to work. That's what the real problem is. Dan.
Goddamn avocado toast.
Fucking and prosecco on the weekends with a little splash of OJ. Brunch, is that what our generation is known for? Brunch. Thanks. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. But with that cheery subject matter now behind us, Dane, do you have any more to say on the topic?
Buy bullets, buy gold, buy land, learn how to grow food, all that stuff. Collect rainwater, drink raw milk. I don't know what you... Just detether yourself from their system as much as possible. That's about all you can do.
Do long division. I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah. Hope that some of your kids stay home in your old age and don't stick you in a home. But, you got to have kids first to be able to do that. So don't chop off your PPE and stuff.
You got to be able to afford them. So anyway, with that being said, where can they find episode 198 of Weapons of Maim Destruction, Dave?
They can find this episode at wmdpodcast.com/198. They can get the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. They can get the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and X. And then they can link up with us on all our other socials, Twitter, X, TikTok, private members only Facebook page at $5 a month or more of support. Definitely click the link down below in the merch store to cop some merch, donate Bitcoin to our Bitcoin link. But always stay in contact with the show by texting that name rolling across the bottom of your screen, 610-596-9637. That's 610-596-WMDP. Join in the email list so that you can stay in contact with us if we get nuked. And, other than that, like, subscribe, share, comment, do all the things that give the algos food so that we get pushed out to more people. Thank you for your service, and we'll see you on 199.
There you go. And as always, Mimi, stay safe, but more importantly, stay free.